So we'll try to bounce it back, right? So some of the off-season stuff may come up.
And so we have a voice.
On both.
You're not negotiating against widgets, you're negotiating against men that make the product that you sell.
When we are fighting the battle for players' rights, we don't apologize for it.
Thank you so much.
What's up, man?
Lance, what's up?
What's going on? What's going on?
And then we're going to try to, be done in 45 minutes. Any other questions, hot button topics you want to avoid? Anything you think? Okay. We are live. Okay.
Okay, so we're live.
I'm going to mute myself.
We are live.
Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
What's up, fellas?
Yeah, dude.
Oh. We're on the live stream now, so anything you say can be broadcast to the internet. Okay. All right, let's go. You're just watching? Okay. Tom, you want to ask the first question? Thanks for joining. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Welcome to the NFLPA Annual Super Bowl Press Conference. My name is George Atala. It's a pleasure to be with everybody, both in person and virtually. We have a number of our executive committee members who have joined us via Zoom. So if you're here, we will spotlight them, and I'm going to have to do a little juggling on the moderation. Thanks to everybody who made the trip out today. I think we're going to turn it over to our first speaker, NFLPA President J.C. Tretter, who's going to make a few remarks, and then over to Dee, answer your questions, present our Alan Page Community MVP Award, and hopefully make it to Sunday. J.C.?
Thanks, George. I appreciate everybody being here today. I just want to start with thank yous, and with a year like this, it's a little bit of a long list, but personally for me, I want to thank my family, my mom, my dad, my sister, and my wife, Anna, who from the get-go, a little under a year ago, was extremely supportive of me running for this position and these responsibilities. And through a long and grinding year was just an amazing sounding board and a terrific partner. And then I want to thank the executive committee for their leadership, their participation, and their perspective. And for the new members, I'm not sure anybody was exactly ready for what COVID was going to throw at us this year, and that probably goes for the members that returned to the executive committee, but we were thrown into the fire, and I am extremely proud of the work we did to serve our members. To the staff, thank you for your continued work in defending and protecting our players. And Dee, with how things went down and the timing of everything, we had to get to know each other pretty quickly. And watching the work you do to protect our players and defend our guys, it is very much appreciated. And then with a year like this, I want to thank everybody who stepped foot in an NFL facility this year. We knew this was not going to be easy. Our goal from the start was not just to start the year, but to finish it and crown a Super Bowl champion. And to do that, we knew everybody needed to buy in, everybody needed to comply to the protocols, and everybody needed to look out for one another. And a group that doesn't get spoken about enough is our players and our staff's families, who as well had to buy into those protocols and live their lives differently away from the facility in order to protect their significant others, their parents, so they could then go to the facility and keep their colleagues and teammates safe. That leads us to what feels like an eternity ago, and that's the fact that we passed a new CBA this past year. And in that deal, we gained a lot of things, some highlights. We gained a greater share of a growing pie. We reached back to former players, as we have done in previous CBAs. 700 former players now will qualify for a pension with a new vesting standard. And 10,000 former players will see an increase in their pensions. And a goal we set out to do in 2019, we wanted to help our core players. And we did that by drastically increasing the minimum salaries of our players. One thing probably nobody knew at the time when that CBA passed, but we learned quickly after was it gave us a platform to negotiate the COVID amendments that were necessary, both financially and the health and safety, in order to get this year off the ground. And to do that, we needed help from our player leadership. And they were involved in the discussions, the negotiations, and the decision-making on how exactly we were going to have a NFL season, a contact sport in the midst of a global pandemic. And, you know, we are not out of the woods yet. The rest of the world and the country continue to wrestle with this virus. And we need to expect to do the same work we did last year and come together and deal with issues we've already spoken about and new issues that will come up in order to prepare for next season and seasons ahead. COVID forced us to do things differently this year. We made up new rules, we changed old ones, and we showed that we were forced to prepare differently, and we showed that we could prepare differently. And another thing we'll be tasked with is coming together as leaders, looking back at those changes, at those new rules, and figuring out which of those shouldn't just be there to combat COVID, but instead should stick with our league long-term for the betterment of everybody involved. And the way we have those discussions is by having our player leadership. And we made sure not to let COVID throw off our democratic process. We made sure to go and we elected reps for all 32 teams in the fall. And I'm looking forward to going through these issues with those men, and I'm sure new issues that will come up. We need our player leadership and our player membership to stay engaged and involved in our process and our thoughts. This was an amazing year for player engagement and player involvement with everything that went on. And we know that the strength of our union comes from our player voice. And I think the perfect example of that would be the hashtag We Want to Play this summer, where over 400 players stood up and demanded the necessary protections for themselves and their teammates. In the end, our union is strong, and there is surely uncertain times ahead. But if this season has proven anything, it's that an informed and engaged player leadership and membership, we can both defend what we have as well as push for the necessary gains in the future.
Well, the pleasure that I have as the executive director of this union is really reflected in the words from JC. In any given year, the fact that we signed a new collective bargaining agreement for another more than a decade of labor peace would be the leading story. As you all know, the leading story, of course, is the fact that we've been able to pull off 256 games, heading into one of the greatest sporting events in history during a pandemic. All of that comes down to leadership. And for our executive committee members, our president, just a tremendous amount of thanks. A lot of people out there don't really realize what it means to be a union, and certainly sometimes don't understand what it means to be a leader in a union. It is a tremendous amount of pressure. And while I love everything that our men do on the field, I will never love anything more than the fact that they have stepped up to the plate to be union leaders. With that, a shout out to a group of people in Bessemer, Alabama right now who are struggling with the decision over whether they should form a union. In Bessemer at the Amazon plant, we stand shoulder to shoulder with every union because we understand exactly how hard this fight is. And I'm proud of the fact that our union leadership doubled down after we got a CBA done, and then went through 2 more CBA negotiations in order to make sure that we could not only complete this season, but complete this season in a way that was fair for those who wanted to play, fair for those who did not want to play, and fair for the people who were going to play this game and engage in this risk. To the EC, love you guys to death. We have had just one incredible ride. Hopefully no one else will ever have a tough of a duty as you have had over the last year. It has not been easy. JC mentioned a lot of people, but he's been the first COVID president. He was probably the first NFLPA president to break down film because they didn't have a coach during a game, but he also became a father for the first time during COVID. So JC, thanks for checking all those boxes off on the front end. We appreciate it. But seriously, for all of the members of the EC and for the board, thank you very much. It's been an incredible year. To our NFLPA staff, I mentioned a few of them during our joint conversation with Roger earlier. Our medical team, the NFLPA staff, done an incredible job leading us through this. Proud of them. And then to a special group of people, and I'm going to take a little bit of pain and mention everybody's name. 3 days after we finalized the CBA, I was blessed enough to put together our first COVID task force. And we decided we were going to rely on some of the best and brightest minds in the country to answer two questions. Should we be playing NFL football in a pandemic? And if we should, and if we can play that game, how do we do it in the safest possible way? So to a group of people who really took on an unprecedented task, Colonel Jeffrey Ling, David Talon, Herman Taylor, Aaron Bagish, Ross Savante, Mark Verstegen, Dan Helfling, Peter Holland, Michael Aronoff, Ross McKinney, Laurent Tardif, former chief, and Amber Cargill. Thank you for everything you've done for us. It was led by an incredible group of people, Tom Mayer and Sean Santavari on our side. We simply couldn't have done it without you. You guys know that over the years, we've sometimes found ourselves in a couple of dust-ups battles with the National Football League. I'm proud to say that we were able to do a lot this year together that we certainly couldn't do separately. So to Roger, to Alan Sills, Larry Farazani, the team over at the NFL, thank you very much for a great partnership, and proud of everything we've been able to do together. Last, before we head into just a few questions, just a couple of things about where we are in the country. We all love this game, and we love the fact that our players can work as one critical part of the partnership to produce something on Sundays, I guess this year, sometimes Mondays, sometimes Wednesdays, that we can put on such a great story and narrative that feature the players of the National Football League. But I'm really proud, and probably in the 12 years that I've been in this job, I don't think I've been more proud of the way in which our union came together with the league to follow the science, to engage in smart business, and to get ourselves back to work. And I think that when we can be one small example of how well the country can work, that's a great day for the country. It just also happens to be a great day for football. So with that, let's turn it over to questions, and George or someone will call on people, and I'll do my best not to answer your question, which is kind of what I excel at.
Tom, you want to go first? Go ahead.
Tom Pellicero with NFL Network. This season was defined not just by COVID, but also, and particularly in the offseason, various social justice related initiatives taken not just at the NFL level, but obviously the Players Coalition, grassroots movements, even within teams. I'm curious, and this is for you, D, as well as JC. I see Michael Thomas, Calais are in the chat, all these guys. Where do you envision that going from here?
Yeah, let me tee that up for the EC. The only thing I would say is I'm proud of the fact that our players have been on the right side of history. Dave Megacy, union leader, was probably the first player to protest during the national anthem when he was protesting against the Vietnam War. And our players came out of the tunnel in St. Louis after the shooting in Ferguson. Colin, number of players took their voices to the sidelines. And I'm proud of the fact that not that we were validated, I'm proud of the fact that our players had the courage to do the right thing at a time when they didn't know how they were going to be treated and frankly, didn't care. They shouldn't. So with that, I'll leave it to the executive committee to talk about the authenticity of our player voices, but I'm proud of our men.
Sam, if you can hear me, why don't you go first?
Yeah, well, to that question, what has the NFL or even NFLPA or the players specifically been able to do this is coming from a player who wasn't on a team this year. Like, we were in the cities in Chicago helping build food marts, or people in Buffalo who were changing the school system, people in Houston. Right, look at Michael Thomas and what he was able to do. There are many players, executive committee members, player leaders who are Walter Payton Man of the Year nominees or even winners, who are on the ground doing the work. And so I think for us, the question is, okay, was the NFL serious when we said we were serious, right? As players, we've always been serious, but we wanted the NFL to try and back us up and to try and show some support. And I think one of the biggest things that I've seen is somewhat of a collaboration, right? Listening to voices not only on teams, but also in the community who are serious about making change. We saw Roger Goodell come and say, I was wrong when it comes to Colin Kaepernick. I think that was a big statement. I don't know if ownership was behind him in that statement. From what I understand, they were surprised that he said that, right? It was wrong. And so for us as players, whether in communities where there are teams or in other communities where we live, I think that we always have been and we will continue to be serious about making change in our communities. And go to anyone's social media profile and go to anyone's website, and you'll see that that we're serious about making change, not just for this season, not just because of what we saw with George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Michael Brown and Tamir Rice, but we want this to be a long-lasting, forever thing.
Mike T, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'll just add on to it because, Sam, I mean, that was a great job, explaining everything or most of the things that not only our league and the union, but, what everybody was able to do together. I think that was a great job explaining that, Sam. I'll touch on this. I think moving forward, the collaborative effort of both the players in the league and the organization, I think that should continue. Using that momentum that we had last year and finally being able to see, players putting together initiatives and the organizations finally really backing them up authentically. The league really backing them and doing it not just, with maybe a donation, but through their social platforms as well, because that's huge. I think Calais Campbell, when they were with the Ravens, they put out a letter to the Senate. And I think that was awesome. In the Texans, we saw that, and we got behind it. We did the same exact thing. So finding ways to collaboratively, push the momentum forward, push all our efforts forward to try to create real change. I think that's what we should see in the future.
And to just piggyback on that real quick, we saw players in Denver go and change laws. Not only did they protest, but they went and they changed laws to make the city of Denver more, and the state of Colorado, more equitable. We saw players in Miami stand hand in hand, arm in arm, to go and make real change. We saw people all around the country, right? Not only in the NFL, right? We're proud of what we've done in the NFL, but we've seen the leagues come together, right? You saw what the NBA did, saying we're not going to play. And many players on many teams in many cities decided we're not going to practice. We may not play, right? We saw leagues all around the nation come together to stand for social justice. And so to piggyback on what Mike T just said, and on what I believe everyone, not only on the executive committee, but all our player representatives and players in the NFL believe, is that it's going to take more than just us, right? Yes, we can lead and we can have the vision, but it's going to take the NFL, the MLB, the NHL, MLS, the WNBA, the NBA, not only the players, but also the leagues, right? Not only the leagues, but the fans to come together, have one voice, and stand for real change, not just to talk about it, but to be about it.
One or two more comments from the EC, then we can move to Albert Breer, who's got our next question. Anybody else want to jump in?
Hey, George, the last thing I'd probably add is, Sam mentioned other unions, other leagues. I can't really talk about the strength of the player's voice without mentioning what I consider to be the gold standard. A group of WNBA players took on a challenge, not only about social justice, but took on a challenge against a sitting owner, and led a tidal wave that resulted in the election of two new senators in Atlanta. I'm sorry, in Georgia. Hey, there is an inextricable and unbreakable thread that runs through all of this, and it's a group of people who simply refuse to be put in a corner and defined by what they do on the field, on the pitch, or on the court. And as Sam and Michael and others have mentioned, I'm proud when our sister unions decide that they are going to be effective agents for change.
Benjamin, go ahead.
Yeah, no, just say, the time is always right to do what is right. And it's been alluded to with Commissioner Goodell and his statement, but also what has seemed to be, for many people, a delayed response by the NFL at large. It quite frankly doesn't matter when that happens. We are glad to see it happen. And change can always come no matter what the timing is. There's always a right time, and the time is always right to correct those things. What I've been proud of, I think, is what's happened behind closed doors within NFL locker rooms. Now, I as well wasn't in the locker room last year, but I can remember specifically having knockout, drag-out arguments, fights about what's going on, people coming from different backgrounds, trying to understand each other. I really believe that what we've seen and the way the public perception has changed has greatly been influenced by players. Players have, from all backgrounds, have said, you know what, I may not understand what's going on right now. I don't understand your feeling when you see what happened to George Floyd, but you know what, because I care about you, because I love you, I'm going to listen to it, and we're going to have a conversation about it, and we're going to hone in on how to make things better. And so when I see kind of the shift that's happening in the narrative outside of the locker room, in the fan bases, in the public at large, I look at players and applaud players for standing in the gap when it wasn't popular to do so. They continue to fight. They continue to go and deal with the abuse, deal with the name calling, deal with all those sorts of things. They persevered, and now we're starting to see some of the fruit of that labor. And even as we look back over history, we've seen players across all sports who have stood up in times that were crucial in different types of crises, and they've always stood for what was right. And so I've been proud just to be a part of that, and excited to see what's going to happen moving forward, because as we know, the arc is very long, and sometimes these things take a long time, but there's a great amount of I would say momentum that has grown because of what happened last year. What happened last year was awful, but in order for there to be growth, just like when you go work out, there has to be some tearing down of muscle, and I think that's what we've seen.
Thanks, Benjamin. Breer?
Okay, thanks for doing this, guys. Dee, I think we all know that we're all at the mercy of the virus and what happens in our country to some degree. Have you guys started to map out with the league what the spring and summer might look like? And then for the players, what do you guys think it would take to make you feel comfortable for the league to start scaling back some of the protocols?
Yeah, well, we haven't really had conversations with the league yet about the offseason. We've had a lot of conversations internally with our player leadership and with the teams. Look, we changed the offseason, I mean, I would like to say on a dime, except for the fact that there were, literally hand-to-hand combat of negotiations behind that. We changed preseason because we felt that it didn't make sense during the course of a pandemic. I think every one of these guys who have lived in a football world for a very long time saw their teams do a lot of things differently, but let's just put differently to the side. It was smarter. So the fact that you just didn't have guys hold up in a facility for hours on end, just killing time, the fact that we were actually able to do things via teleconference and Skype and Zoom, it's all about being smarter. And so at the end of the day, I think that what will happen is we have our annual rep meetings coming up in March. We'll continue to talk to the players about the things that they think were a better, smarter way of playing football. And I think some of those things, most of those things don't have anything to do with COVID. But then going forward, look, the reality is just the math. There's 253 million adults in the country. The country needs to reach 85% of those people to be vaccinated in order for us to reach herd immunity. If you're doling out a vaccine at 1 million doses per day, you're still at 200 and some odd days before you get to most of the adults. To think that we are going to be in a vaccine neutral state in September is probably not the case. We've got tremendous work to do in the country, and I think The goal should be to focus on where we need to be in the country. Hey, what we found out is we can fix football. And at the end of the day, let's not forget, vaccines great. Social distancing, wearing a mask, testing and contact tracing is the most effective killer of this virus, not the vaccine. So if we can get our heads around that, like we've done in football, football will fix itself, and so will the country.
JC, you want to tag on to the off-season question? Then we'll move to a question from the floor, and we've got some people's hands raised virtually. JC?
Yeah, I mean, like Dee touched on, we did things differently this year. And I know myself and many of my teammates and players across the league I talked to felt both physically better and mentally sharper at the end of the season. The amount of hours at the facility were down. The amount of reps were down. And we've had this false reality that that's necessary. A ton of reps are necessary. As we watch our bodies break down by the end of the year every year, and then we jump right back into off-season program and grind our bodies down to jump right back into training camp, and it's a never-ending grind. And like I said in the opening remarks, we saw that we can do things differently this year, and the level of play didn't go down. We still had maybe one of the most exciting seasons of all time heading into an amazing playoffs. This all change, we went through change this year. And change is always scary, but we've come out on the other side in a much better position. And now it's the point of getting down with the league, talking to them about which of these changes we should move forward, because they are better for everybody involved. The game's growing and getting better, and we are healthier and can play longer, and players can stay on the field. That is good for everybody involved.
Jenna Lane, ESPN. You guys push so hard for daily testing. Kind of along the lines of what Albert had just asked, will you try and push for vaccination before you return to play? Whether that's in an off-season program, we don't know if we're going to have one of those yet, or training camp.
Yeah, just to echo comments I've said before, I care far more about Americans getting vaccinated and reaching herd immunity than I'm even thinking about NFL players getting vaccinated in order for us to have a better practice. I mean, when you frame it that way, it doesn't sound right because it isn't right. We found out that we can actually get through an entire season by doing the things that we know prevent the spread of the virus. And I think focusing on those and what we're going to be doing in the offseason is the right way to think about it. We'll have plenty of time to talk about vaccinations when they become available to this age group. I would like to say that I'm not in their age group, so I will be getting the vaccine before any of you cats. But look, I think what we've been able to show this year is we can get football back to work by simply following all of the scientific steps that we keep hearing about and we've heard about for months. And by changing the course and activity of the game and changing our offseason, we'll focus on that first and then start to talk about vaccinations when they've become available to everyone who should get them before we do.
And if I might ask a follow-up, are you guys comfortable with the off-season testing protocol, as players do still need to go into facilities from time to time for treatment?
Yeah, we're looking at that right now. Look, just to level set, I think that there is a high likelihood that we will be having similar, if not the same, or we should have similar, if not the same, testing protocols into the off-season. Those things have to be discussed as soon as the Super Bowl is over. I'm sure Roger and I will take, at least a half an hour off after Sunday before we get back together to talk about the off season. But look, what we've done has worked incredibly well, and it has not been perfect by any stretch. But I think the way that we have crafted the protocols, we've enforced the protocols. Some teams are, and some coaches are a little bit lighter in the pocketbook because of it. But I think if we can wrap our hands around the things that have worked and employ them again this season, I don't have any doubts about our success.
Thanks, Jenna. Next question will come virtually from Zennie Abraham, and then we'll move back to the floor.
Thank you. I'm trying to actually. Oh, here we go.
Team.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry for the delay in responding, but yesterday at the press conference, Dr. Sills, in response to my question, if there was a scenario to project forward the variants to the virus and how to respond, he said that they hadn't found any player that had a variant of the coronavirus. But my concern, I'm asking Mr. Smith and those present, are you projecting forward with respect to how to respond if there's a variant 4 times more powerful and how it impacts you, so you're not getting into these fist fights, if you will, and you have a plan to move forward? Thank you.
Yeah, great question. But let me, again, just set the table a little bit. The fist fights is what ends up creating the plan, right? I know that everybody would like to think that Roger and I and both sides, the EC and the owners, just get on a call and then everything's great. If anybody was on the calls between our two sides in March, April, May, June, July, they weren't warm and fuzzy by any stretch. We'll figure out the best protocol and then we adapt. We came out with a set of protocols for off season and training camp that we continue to tinker at club facilities that we're going to continue to look at. And I think those are the one thing that I think we probably need to step up and improve during the off season, given the fact that more and more of these variants are making themselves known. And there's at least a decent amount of science right now that indicates they might spread faster. But without us having an ability to mix it up, and draw a line in the sand and then negotiate to a place that keeps our players safe. If you want to see a scenario where there wasn't a union in a position to protect its workers, look at the recent ProPublica story about meat packers and what happened to workers in that industry during COVID. There were dozens of people who lost their lives because of what they were doing at work. So our job is to make sure that if we have to fight about these things, we have to fight about these things. But it's also to make sure that we are in a position to adapt and evolve to keep our players safe.
And that's why you recognize the people on our COVID task force and Dr. Mayer who lead that, who are already starting to look into some of those issues. Back to the floor.
Good afternoon, and thank you, gentlemen. Eric Wilson, WKII. This season, the NFL highlighted women in the NFL as coaches, referees, and so on. I'm just curious, what is the NFLPA and the NFL doing to give them more equality and inclusion in the Shield?
A great question, and the guys can jump in this. We've talked about it on a conference call. You've heard me talk about, our feelings, my feelings about diversity in the National Football League for years. The league has asked us to talk with them, assist them in improving diversity and inclusion in the National Football League. With that, there have been some incredible strides this year. First time for an all-black group of referees refereeing a game. We have a tremendous referee who's a woman who's going to be the first to referee a game as a woman. I don't think there's any coincidence that those accomplishments occurred with the only other labor union in the country that's in the business of football, the referees union. But look, does it mean that it's a success story? I don't think so. When you look at the recent round of coaches and hiring, that's the nicest thing I can say is not good. I believe that we should move to a system where there is somebody in charge at the National Football League of diversity and inclusion. I think you have to increase transparency about what's going on in the hiring process. I think you have to increase accountability where we actually use metrics to find out how well we're doing on the field with head coaches, with assistant coaches, with team front offices, with league front offices, and with NFL ownership. And I think you have to decrease the barriers that have existed for other people in this business to unionize. The state of cheerleaders in the National Football League is, again, I think something that nobody in the league should be proud of. When a group of women are still working for the most part for less than minimum wage in a business that generates in excess of, well, except for COVID this year, would have been what, $14 billion? Should we be doing a better job there? Of course we should. But all of that doesn't happen by just simply deciding that we want to have X goal 2 years, 3 years, 4 years from now. Those things don't work. What works is if you have something in place that assures accountability and transparency. And we have one, and it's called the NFL Players Association. And the referees have one, and it's called the NFL Referees Association. So if we want to make a real commitment to change, let's make a real commitment for the processes to accomplish change.
Hey, D, George, thank you. Just to kind of follow up on that theme, D, can you shed some light on what type of feedback you have received personally from your membership about minority hiring and the cycles in recent years? And as a second part of the question, what types of things do you think, and some of the executive committee can weigh in on this, I'd hope as well, what type of things could players do to become more involved in the process if they should, in fact, be more involved in trying to make it more equitable for head coaching opportunities?
Yeah, why don't we turn that over to the EC, and then I'll finish up on a couple of things that we've talked about specifically.
Anybody want to jump in, Mike T?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just go first because I know some other guys probably got, want to touch on it. But I'll say this. I mean, I think, a lot of players have been, using their voices and using their platforms to, speak on this issue. They vouch for head coaches that have been, minorities, black, or of other ethnicities, people of color, to become head coaches, to become coordinators. And, for whatever reason, it didn't really happen this time where there were 6 job openings and I think, two people of color got hired, one at the very end. So, I mean, I think at the end of the day, the players are doing their part, using their voices, using their platforms. I think D hit on it best, like having a system, having somewhere you can have like some levels of metrics where you can track and actually prove and show, what that process is like and have some type of transparency. I think that'll probably be the best thing, and if players can be a part of that committee, great. But other than that, using your voices, using your platform as players, that's what we can do, and just hopefully keep fighting for some type of metric system that can keep track of that.
Anybody else want to weigh in on the EC? Okay.
I recently wrote an article in the Players Tribune titled "Upstairs and Downstairs" that talks about the race issue in the NFL, how 17, now 18 years ago, the Rooney Rule was created, right? It was created because there were 3 black coaches in the NFL. And 17, 18 years later, there are still 3 black head coaches in the NFL. And so I think we all know there's a problem. So the question is, okay, what is the solution? One thing that I've seen is players using their voice, players speaking up on behalf of a coach that they believe in, right? You see that happening time in and time out. Now, it doesn't help when a player speaks up and then someone squashes down their voice or their opinion to say, oh, you get paid too much money to talk, right? That doesn't help, right? What helps is when players who are part of systems trying to win organizations can see what they see and know what they know and use their voice for good. I think about some of the task forces and also some of the committees that have been put in place in ownership to try and address some of these issues, right? You have this, the owners have a committee that addresses this. Well, out of that committee, I believe there's 10 people on that committee and 8 or 9 are old white men, right? Talking about diversity. So I believe that's an issue. So I think a lot of the players believe if you want to see change, you need to see different faces and different voices that are at the table trying to make some of those changes. And so I think players are trying to do it. Players are doing it, but also there needs to be buy-in from ownership, which I think they're taking steps, but it's by no means not enough, not nearly enough, and more needs to be done.
Well, we intend to present a plan to the league And look, what we're talking about in the National Football League is something that hundreds of corporations have been doing for the last 20 years. How do you increase the pipeline of people who are eligible to be hired? We should look at that. We've had an NFLPA All-Star game for years. One of the things we've always been interested in doing was having coaches of color be active NFL coaches of color be head coaches in our Hall of Fame game. It's been hard to do that because we haven't been able to get the league's permission to have those people coach in that game. Why do I want those people to coach in that game? Because it allows them to put head coaching experience on their resume. So if we can start to build the pipeline as step one. Step two, decrease the barriers for people's ability to transfer to teams. We've had a system in the National Football League where if you were a coach at a certain position on one team and you were interested in a job at another team at the same or a higher level, you had to get the permission of the owner in order to apply for that job. That's a barrier to entry. So let's get rid of barriers to entry. I think the last time that there was a salary study for what NFL coaches make, what their benefit packages are, was a study that Gene commissioned at a time when we were hosting and supporting the Assistant Coaches Association. But, you know, look, the assistant coaches decided to go in another direction because, frankly, they weren't interested in unionizing. I don't know what they're doing now, but I think that association still exists. What they've been able to accomplish, given this round of hiring this year, leaves a lot to question. But if you're not on the side of building accountability structures and transparency structures, then you're not only not helping improve diversity, you're actually hurting those efforts. Because if you're an association that pretends that you are there to support things like diversity and you've not been able to do anything to further those goals, you're actually creating a world where people think that there's something out there that's helping, when in reality, you and I both know they're not, right?
Just to follow up on that, D, in terms of feedback from your membership, how passionate are your players about this issue?
You heard Michael Thomas talk about that's going on in the community, and Sam Acho. Are there others who want to jump in?
I can.
Oh, go ahead.
I can say something. This is Wesley. I've talked to several players throughout the season, you know, especially towards the back end, when they see these vacancies of coaches not being hired. They're not black. They're not, you know, any other race besides a white guy. And it does frustrate players, especially African-American players, because we see ourselves as potential leaders within the NFL community. We want to inspire ourselves to be head coaches. We want to be GMs. But if you have guys like Eric Bieniemy, who's been an NFL legend, who's done great things within his offense, within the team that he's on, going to two back-to-back Super Bowls, like that frustrates us as players. But I think the great thing that Sam said and Dee said too, there has to be a platform to where we can hold each other accountable, to where the conversation continue to keep rolling, and to now these GMs, these owners have no choice but to say, hey, we have to really seriously check ourselves, because this is an issue that has been going on. We put this rule in 17 years ago, and there has not been any kind of change. There's 3 coaches that are still black. That's the progress that we want to see. But if we don't create these platforms to put everybody on the same level and let these owners know that, hey, we're players. Our players are playing in this league. We give so much to this league. They want to be coaches too one day. And I think that's a system that we have to put in place.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I think that part of it is the assumption also that we're only talking about former players. There are several people outside of the former player realm who would love an opportunity and are very qualified to have leadership positions in the NFL. We're also talking about coaches, but we're talking about C-level positions. And this isn't just unique or germane to the NFL. When you look across corporate America, 3.2% of C-level positions are Black Americans, even though we make up 13, 12% of the population. And so this is not an issue that is only in the NFL, although that's what we're talking about right now. So part of it, number one, is understanding that there's a wealth of knowledge outside of the guys who are simply playing, although we would love those opportunities as well. I think the first part of this conversation, though, and the toughest part, I think, is deciding or having the conversation about, is this really an issue? Some people will say it's not. Some people will say it is. Are the outcomes truly an issue? Is there something nefarious going on? Is there nepotism going on? Are all these things even true? We can't come to an understanding about that, then we have a long way to go. Secondly, when it comes to equity, we're not simply talking about an equal outcome. It is about an equal opportunity to have an outcome. That's the frustrating part. That's what you hear from so many people. Men don't feel like they have an equal opportunity. And so it's going to take, yes, it's going to take accountability. It's going to take strategy. It's going to take doing something outside of the norm. But quite frankly, it's going to take intentional action from those in power. It's going to take ownership saying, you know what, this is going to be a priority for me. I'm going to do something that maybe my colleagues don't think is right, but I'm going to give this opportunity to someone I know is qualified. And in that way, you start to create other pipelines. If that doesn't happen, we'll keep coming back here having the same conversation over and over again. It's going to take players, of course. It's going to take us on the outside saying, you know what, these are candidates that we see in the game and outside the game that we know are qualified to be head coaches. Let's rally behind them. Let's plan. Let's almost like politics. Let's campaign for them. But it's also going to take, the way the structure of the NFL is, going to take ownership to say, this is something important. I'm going to actively get out of my comfort zone and do this, not with someone who's not qualified, but with someone I know who is, but may not be in my pipeline, in my circle. I'm going to give them this opportunity because I know generations after that person need this to happen in order for them to have an opportunity as well.
And to the point of nepotism and cronyism, just to follow up on Ben's point, owners are the ones who decide who's hired and who's fired. And so we could come up with as many systems and consequences as we want, but an individual owner, there's 31 of them, are the ones that have to decide, as Ben said, this coach, whether he's black, yes, he may be black, but he's qualified. You know what I mean? It's not this, like, owners have to make those decisions. There's a guy, Champ Kelly. He's was a scout, then now he's an assistant general manager. He built a championship roster in Denver, right? He helped that team become, and West played in Denver, right? Champ was, in a lot of ways, the reason why Denver was able to have a roster to win a Super Bowl, right? Well, he leaves. He goes to Chicago, right? He helps build a roster where in 2018, Chicago went to the playoffs for the first time in years, right? A team that was 12-4. He helped build that roster. Yet for whatever reason, and Champ is an African-American man, he's a black man, for whatever reason, Champ's not getting calls to be a general manager. For whatever reason, when Champ wants to talk about maybe a raise, or Champ wants to talk about, to Dee's point, of going to interview somewhere else, you have to ask for permission. And Champ's not the only one. We've had players. So the question about, what do players think? Players have had conversations with people in management, people on the C level, people who are scouts, who are general manager candidates, people who are coaches, people who are work as DPEs, director of player engagement, saying, "Man, we don't have a voice. Like, can you please help us? Use your voice, help us." And that's why you're seeing players use their voice. But at the end of the day, we can talk all we want. There's 31 owners who have to make that decision. 30 of them are of one race, if you will. And we have to kind of change that conversation.
Thanks. Lots of passions there. Thanks, Jarrett. We're going to do one virtual question, move to Lindsay, take a couple of other virtual questions before we do our Alan Page presentation. So, Darren Smith.
Thank you very much, DeMaurice. It's always good to see and talk to you. Jared Bill kind of stole my thunder some, but I do want to ask you, because we look at the situation that's taking place with Deshaun Watson with the Houston Texans, and we talk about former players that are speaking up and wanting some of these coaches, coordinators having the opportunity. What do you what is your opinion, I guess, of players who, when there are openings such as that speak up and look, I'm someone who grew up in, with protesting, but would you advise or would you support players who decided to protest against their own bosses or organizations to make sure that, someone such as Eric Bieniemy or Todd Bowles or Byron Leftwich got a chance to not only interview, but have a fair chance at being named the head coach of their particular squad?
Yeah, there's never going to be a day when I don't urge our players, urge our members as men to use their voices and step up for what's right, regardless of what happens. You look at that famous picture of Muhammad Ali at the Cleveland Summit. Who was there? There were basketball players, but there were a lot of football players who risked their careers at a time to support a man who chose to exercise his religious freedom not to go fight in the Vietnam War. So under what scenario can I look at Walter Beach in the face, or remember my friend Bobby Mitchell, or look at Jim Brown in the face, and look at the risk that they took to stand up and say what's right, and not, on the other hand, turn to a group of players in 2021 and exhort them to use their voice for what's right about social justice or hiring. Again, there is a thread that runs through all of it, and our job is to simply embrace the history that we have.
Lindsay?
Hi, Dee, and to the executive committee as well. I believe you guys have started having discussions with the NFL about what revenues has looked like this year, what the salary cap might look like for 2021. At this point, do you believe it will be at that $175 million floor? Could it be higher than that? And there will be losses. So what is that going to mean for your players, and what concerns maybe do the players have about what 2021 will look like for the free agent market when there is a significant drop?
Let me work backwards a little bit. JC mentioned the fact that we ratified a CBA in March, right before COVID hit. We had two successive CBA deals after that. What we affectionately refer to as the COVID CBA. Talks about handling losses in revenue in a way so that it doesn't have a dramatic impact on the salary cap. So we have a floor of $175 million, and then we have a process by which, if we think there's going to be losses in the future, we can spread those out as well and then recoup them at a later time. With respect to the salary cap, we've just started to look at the reporting packages. I think the next reporting package will come in February, what's today, 5th? Probably February 6th. So all of those people out there who just love to dive into intricacies of revenue generation in the National Football League, as thrilling as that is, the folks on the NFL side, the NFLPA side, will be looking at that. We do have a $175 million floor. Do I think we will be above the floor? I think there's a decent chance that we could be above the floor. But I'm not going to speculate anymore about the actual salary cap until after we've taken a good look at the reporting packages.
And JC, you want to talk a little bit about free agency, the second part of that question?
Yeah, I think that's going to be an important part for us to work with our agent community as well, and make sure we can help them in a really unique off season. Again, this is not normal. We were put in this position through these negotiations, understanding we were going to have such a significant loss, and our salary cap is based off projections and revenue. And when you have a season which there was limited fans at best at stadiums, there's going to be a significant decline, and that's why we have those negotiations to spread those losses over multiple years in order to protect players and not let one group of players take the complete brunt of that loss. And now we will work with our agent community to help them work for our players and getting them compensated fairly.
Thanks very much. We're getting close to the end. We do have one really important announcement here to close out our Super Bowl press conference. Dee, go ahead.
Every year we have an opportunity to award the NFLPA's highest honor. We named that highest honor after a former player named Alan Page. Alan was a tremendous NFL player, but again, closer to my heart, he was a tremendous supporter of the union. He served on the first executive committee while he was playing. He ended up, obviously, being inducted into the NFL Hall of Fame. But before that, he was an accomplished judge in Minnesota, served 23 years on the Minnesota Supreme Court, established the Alan Page Education Foundation, and is also a recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom. This year, we were going to give that highest honor, the NFLPA Alan Page Community Award, to a shining example of what it means for our athletes and for our men to use your platform for good, but also to achieve change. This year's recipient is named Hayden Hurst from the Atlanta Falcons. In December, Hayden opened up to the world about his struggle with depression and attempted suicide. As a result, he created a safe place for millions of people who also battle mental health, inspiring everyone to continue this dialogue, but equally important, to build structures and support networks for those who suffer. In the 2 months since then, more than $150,000 has been raised by the Hayden Hurst Family Foundation, which builds awareness of mental health issues among children and adolescents by funding mental health services and programs in schools. This funding has supported more than 270 teachers, 5,500 students, and 8,100 parents through a social and emotional training program for kids in kindergarten through 8th grade. It's called In Focus. By having the courage to say that it's okay to not be okay, Hayden has demonstrated not only a sense of personal struggle, personal survival, and personal triumph, but he's incredibly promoted a sense of success for millions of kids who look up to our athletes as heroes. So on behalf of the NFLPA, Alan Page, the former winners of the Community Service Award, I'm honored to present the 2021 NFLPA Alan Page Award to Hayden Hurst of the Atlanta Falcons. Hayden.
Thank you. What an honor. You know, I'm totally humbled to be the 2021 recipient of the Alan Page Community Award. 5 years ago, from where I was, where I'm at now, I really have to pinch myself. It's been such a wild ride, but to be in this position to help people and to give back is just remarkable. The money that we're going to receive from this award is going to help change so many lives and impact so many lives, and it's going to save lives. So thank you for that. Thank you to the NFLPA, to everyone who voted, to my mom, to my dad, and to my sister. Without them, there would be no Hayden Hurst Family Foundation, and without them, I don't know if I'd still be here. So thank you. And I would be remiss if I did not introduce the brains behind the whole operation, the COO of the Hayden Hurst Family Foundation, and my loving mother, Kathy Hurst.
Hello, everyone. I just want to take a second to thank the NFLPA, to all those wonderful players that also do things in their community, and the other award winners. Thank you so much for what you're doing. It's making a difference because people now are talking about their mental wellness and they're not afraid to speak out about it. And this money is going to do so much for us in our foundation and helping more young people realize it's okay not to be okay and to talk to somebody, because we're losing too many young people to suicide. So I want to thank everyone again for this tremendous honor to Mr. Page and the NFL. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You have a tremendous son, and every now and then it's great to be reminded that these guys who are on the field are always somebody's little boy, right? So thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I'm going to go call my mother. What you going to do?
Thank you very much,
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
So, folks, that was without a doubt, the most engaging, 2 hours and 4 minutes this week. And this, when I end this broadcast, will be processed to become a video. And I'm going to take parts of it especially what you heard regarding the players and talking about the problems of qualified black coaches not getting head coach and coordinator jobs in the league, put out for a separate video, okay? And that'll happen pretty much about a couple hours, less than thereabouts. And got to be mindful of the schedule, that both personal and otherwise. But that's it in terms of what else is coming up with respect to the league. That's it on Zennie62 Media, because that's it for what the NFL is providing right now. And when I say for what the NFL is providing, I don't mean to put a pejorative spin on that. No. This has been a fantastic setup that has worked extremely well. Tomorrow at 1 o'clock, we'll have the NFL Network analysts and media availability. That'll be the only thing. That's at 1 o'clock tomorrow Eastern. And Saturday, NFL Honors at 9 o'clock Eastern. And then Sunday at 10 o'clock, there'll be the post-game availability and after the game, which means, in other words, let me put it this way. Zennie62 Media will take you into the post-game environment. We're having a watch party to watch the Super Bowl, and I'm going to take all the people that are right in with me to the post-game availability so they can feel like they're in there, right? So join us. And then Monday, February 8th at 8 a.m. Eastern. That's early. The thank you from the Tampa Bay Host Committee closing news conference, which includes the passing of the football from Tampa Bay to Los Angeles, where we will enjoy Super Bowl 56. Wow. Getting up there in number. At SoFi Stadium next year, 2022. All right. So, wow. What a talk, right? It was, I've been to a number of meetings like this. That one, I think, was, I don't have to think about it, I say, that was the most no-holds-barred conversation regarding coaching African Americans and the race problem in the NFL I have seen, that was made available to a public audience in such a way that it can be broadcast and rebroadcast and distributed virally via social media. That was something else. So it is 4:03 Eastern, and that, unless anybody has a comment they want to make and write in, there and have it pop up, but I'm really anxious to end the broadcast so the system can go through its propagation process and have this up. All right. Oh, by the way, you might be wondering, if you're watching the entire thing, there was a part that winked out. I wasn't aware of this until after I was asked the question. In other words, let me rephrase that. I wasn't aware that this happened until after I was selected to ask the question. I was selected, then they moved me into a panel room. And what happened was, for about a good 3 seconds, there was no prompt control where I could actually press the unmute and the camera. They have that hidden from you. The host has that control, but the host has to activate that, and then you have to wait from the host's action to the action to get to you so you can see it to respond to. And that was the delay. But in all that, what happened also, I think you all got a dark screen over there. In other words, when I it was like, it looked like this, right? Okay? And I didn't realize that until just a little bit after I presented the question. They were going through the answers, and D. Smith was talking. I thought, oh, wait a minute, let me check. And then I shifted back to D. Smith. I caught part of it. So, dang it, I don't have a copy of myself, I don't think. but maybe. But it wasn't by far the most important aspect of the event. I think the most important aspect of the event was the conversation about race, and clearly something needs to be done. You know, it's just sticking out there too much. But you have two problems. You have the virus, and see, my take is that the league doesn't have a handle on what to do next right now. And if I were running their task force, or if I had not running it, well, yeah, I would. If I had a planning role, I would set up a war room. I would set up a real war room and a room that's virtual. And this goes back to Hans Blumenfeld was a legendary planner in Toronto. He had a war room set up. He was the head of director of planning. This goes back to the mid-'60s. He had and you say, how do I know this? Well, I read his book, and I was born in 62. I was aware of Hans Blumenfeld in 1967. At any rate, Hans had this layout. He had these different boards. This is before the computer and everything else. And he had these boards for different streets and roads and all of these different maps and different plans. And it was a way of being able to respond to different needs and occurrences in the city, different infrastructure needs, and so on. It was quite advanced for its time and quite applicable to a computer generation. But it's also quite applicable to any kind of situation with respect to planning that you can think of, right? Even today. So you need, what the war room does is allows you to bring together different data sets, different areas of information that you've put together, and then use that to form a plan. So you can put the plan on the website, you can discuss it in your rooms, both virtual and real, and then you can set out a plan for implementation, get approval within the room, okay, to move forward. And the idea is if you make it a virtual room, you can, if you make it a virtual room, you can make it shareable on a smartphone like this one, okay? And so people can be part of the decision-making process, the input process from anywhere in the world. So that's what I'm thinking that that needs to be done in this instance. All right, it's 4:08. I'm out of here. I'll talk to you all later. See you tomorrow. Oh, by the way, 1 o'clock tomorrow. I have. Actually, that's 4 o'clock tomorrow. Excuse me. 4 o'clock tomorrow. I have Oakland District 7 Councilmember Traylor Reed as my guest to talk about what she's working on, her concerns. And then I have John Jones, Oakland activist, at 9 o'clock tomorrow. So that should be quite interesting, both of them. All right, thank you for checking this out. Well, by the way, don't forget, join us on Sunday. We're going to really do this 30 minutes before the game. We're having a Super Bowl 55 watch party. I'm inviting all the fans of the weekend to join me so that we can watch. Can't see it here, but we can watch and react to the Pepsi Super Bowl halftime show. I can't show it for copyright reasons. I mean, even just I had one bit of a tune from the weekend that popped up later because the NFL had this interlude, right? And I got a copyright claim for my whole doggone 30-minute live stream, actually longer than that, hour-long live stream, because you were all on it if you were tuning in, for that one little snippet that's like 2 minutes long. I thought, you freaking kidding me? So I had yanked that out. Subscribe to Zennie62 and bookmark oaklandnewsnow.com. See ya. And that ends officially this broadcast.